You wanted a taste of sweetness? Here's your bitter truth.
I thought my biggest worry was Leo's shoelaces, not the apocalypse in an iPad case. Tuesday morning started like any other in our suburban Cleveland home. My 7-year-old son Leo was fumbling with his backpack while I made coffee, and my wife Melissa was already dressed in her sharp marketing executive outfit, tapping furiously on her phone. "Eddie, can you drive Leo today?" "I've got an early meeting," Mel said, without looking up from her screen. She'd been having a lot of early meetings lately, and late ones, and weekend ones. "Sure thing," I replied, stirring my coffee. As an IT security manager, I had flexible hours, unlike my wife, who seemed to live at the office these days. Leo grabbed what he thought was his school iPad from the charging station. In our house, we had 3 identical tablets: mine, Mel's, and Leo's. They all looked the same in their black cases. "Got everything, buddy?" I asked. "Yep, we're doing show and tell about our families today," Leo said excitedly. "I'm going to show pictures of our vacation." Mel's head snapped up. "What pictures?" "The ones on the tablet," Leo said innocently. Something flickered across Mel's face. Panic? But she just smiled. "That's nice, honey. Have fun at school." I dropped Leo off at Roosevelt Elementary and headed to my office downtown. Around 10:30, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the school's number. "Mr. Harper, this is Principal Rowe. You need to come here immediately, please." Her voice was tight, professional, but I caught an undertone of something else. Embarrassment? Horror? "Is Leo okay?" "Leo is fine, but..." "Mr. Harper, just come. Now." The 15-minute drive felt like an hour. When I pulled into the school parking lot, I saw 2 police cars. My stomach dropped. Inside, Principal Rowe led me to her office, where Leo sat in a chair, looking confused. Officer D'Angelo stood near the desk, and Mrs. Patterson, Leo's teacher, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Harper," Principal Rowe began, "there's been an incident. During show and tell, Leo was trying to show family photos, but..." She gestured to the iPad on her desk. The screen was black. "What we found on there," Officer D'Angelo said carefully, "is not appropriate for a 7-year-old to have access to." My blood ran cold. "What kind of not appropriate?" Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "Explicit videos and photographs, very explicit, of your wife with multiple partners." The world tilted. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. "We need to ask," Officer D'Angelo continued, "are you aware of this content? And do you want to press charges?" I looked at the iPad, my wife's iPad, the one Leo had grabbed by mistake, the one that apparently contained an explicit documentary of her extracurricular activities. "Can I see it?" I asked quietly. Principal Rowe hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. What I saw made my stomach lurch. There was my wife of 10 years, without clothes and enthusiastic, with a man I recognized as Darren Brooks, some fitness influencer she'd mentioned meeting at the gym. The timestamp showed it was recorded 3 weeks ago, while I was at a work conference. I scrolled through more files. Different men, different locations. Some I recognized, our bedroom, our living room couch. Others were unfamiliar apartments and hotel rooms. "She always said she was flexible," I muttered. Guess I didn't know how much. "Mr. Harper?" Officer D'Angelo prompted. I looked at Leo, who was playing with a stress ball the principal had given him, oblivious to the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in our family. "Not yet," I said, standing up. "I need to handle this my way first." My phone was already buzzing with calls from Mel. The parking lot confrontation was epic. Mel's white BMW screeched into the school parking lot just as I was buckling Leo into my car. She jumped out, her perfect blonde hair wild, her designer heels clicking frantically on the asphalt. "Eddie, wait, let me explain." Leo looked up. "Hi, Mommy, why do you look scared?" "I'm not scared, baby. Daddy and I just need to talk." I finished securing Leo's seatbelt and closed his door, then turned to face my wife. She was breathing hard, her makeup slightly smudged. "Explain what, exactly?" I kept my voice level. "Explain how our son accidentally showed his class a highlight reel of your amateur adult videos. It's not what you think. Really. Because what I think is that you've been screwing half of Cleveland while I'm at work, documenting it like some kind of perverted scrapbook and storing it on a device our 7-year-old had access to." Mel glanced around nervously. A few other parents were watching from their cars. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. It was a phase. I was confused, stressed with work." "Oh, you were stressed?" I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. "Well, that changes everything. I'm sure the school board will totally understand when they review the footage. Don't worry about little Leo showing explicit content to his second-grade class. Mommy was just having a stressful quarter at work. Eddie, please, I'll delete everything. We can get counseling. I'll quit my job, whatever you want. What I want, I said, stepping closer, is for you to explain to me how a woman who claims to love her family ends up starring in her own personal stash of explicit videos. What I want is for you to tell me how long you've been lying to my face. What I want is to understand how you could risk our son seeing that garbage. Tears started running down her cheeks. I never meant for Leo to see it. I thought it was his tablet. That's your concern? That you mixed up the tablets? My voice was rising despite my best efforts. Not that you were cheating on your husband with multiple men. Not that you were filming it like some kind of trophy collection. 2 more cars pulled up. Mel's friends Jenna and Tara. Great. The cavalry had arrived. Jenna, a bottle blonde with too much Botox, marched over. Eddie, you need to calm down. People make mistakes. Mistakes? I stared at her. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is missing an anniversary. This is a deliberate pattern of betrayal and humiliation. Tara, always the enabler, put her arm around Mel. You don't understand the pressure women are under these days. Mel was just exploring her desires in our marital bed, while her husband was traveling for work, while her child was in the house. I shook my head. You know what? This conversation is over. I started toward my car, but Jenna grabbed my arm. Where's the tablet? I looked down at her manicured fingers on my sleeve. Excuse me? The tablet. We need to make sure this doesn't go any further. For Leo's sake. For Leo's sake. I gently removed her hand. Leo's sake would have been Mel thinking about consequences before she started her documentary project. I got in my car and drove away, leaving the 3 of them standing in the parking lot like a rejected reality TV show cast. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or I'll bury you. D. Darren Brooks, I presumed. The star of several of my wife's home movies. Another text, this one from Principal Rowe. Emergency school board meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Your attendance requested. Perfect. A public forum for this disaster. I looked in the rearview mirror at Leo, who was quietly playing a game on his phone, unaware that his family had just imploded. Time to take control of this situation. The school board meeting was where everything went sideways. By Wednesday evening, the story had leaked. Someone on the school staff, probably Mrs. Patterson, who couldn't keep her mouth shut about anything, had tipped off Cleveland Coffee, the local gossip blog that thrived on suburban scandals. The Roosevelt Elementary cafeteria was packed. Parents, school board members, local reporters, and what looked like half the neighborhood had shown up for the show. I sat in the front row wearing my best suit. Mel sat 3 rows behind me with Jenna and Tara flanking her like bodyguards. I could feel her eyes boring into the back of my head. Principal Rowe called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the incident that occurred during show and tell yesterday morning. Board member Janet Walsh, a stern woman in her 60s, leaned forward. Mr. Harper, the school is considering whether to involve Child Protective Services. This represents a serious lapse in parental supervision. Before I could respond, Mel stood up. I'd like to address the board. She walked to the front of the room, her chin raised defiantly. She'd chosen her outfit carefully conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back, the picture of a repentant suburban mom. I want to apologize to everyone, she began, her voice trembling slightly. What happened was a terrible accident. My husband and I are going through some marital difficulties, and I made some poor choices. But I love my son, and I would never intentionally expose him to inappropriate content. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several parents nodded sympathetically. However, Mel continued, and I felt my jaw clench. I also want you to know that my husband has been emotionally toxic throughout our marriage. He's controlling, jealous, and has made my life a nightmare. The videos were my way of feeling like I had some control over my own body again. The crowd's mood shifted. Now I was the villain. Janet Walsh looked at me with new suspicion. Mr. Harper, how do you respond to these allegations? I stood up slowly, looking around the room at the faces staring back at me. Time for some truth. Emotional misuse, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the cafeteria. That's interesting. Let me tell you what emotional misuse actually looks like. I turned to face Mel directly. Emotional misuse is lying to your spouse for months while carrying on multiple affairs. Emotional misuse is using marital funds to pay for hotel rooms where you film explicit recordings with strangers. Emotional misuse is storing that indecent footage on a device your child has access to. The room was dead silent. Emotional misuse, I continued, is standing in front of a room full of parents and trying to gaslight your way out of consequences by playing the victim card. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I spent last night going through my wife's digital footprint, bank statements, credit card records, phone logs. Would you like to know what I found? Mel's face went white. 17 different hotel charges over the past 6 months, all on days when she claimed to be working late. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts to numbers I don't recognize, and my personal favorite, a Google Drive account with over 3 hours of video content featuring my wife and various men. The crowd erupted. Parents were shouting questions, reporters were scribbling notes, and board members were frantically trying to restore order. The real question, I said, raising my voice over the chaos, isn't whether I'm toxic. The real question is how a mother could be so reckless with her child's well-being that she'd store explicit material on a device he uses for homework. I sat down. Mel was crying now, but they looked like tears of rage rather than remorse. Janet Walsh banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! When the room finally quieted, she looked directly at me. Mr. Harper, do you have legal representation? I do now. Good. I think you're going to need it. As the meeting broke up, I walked past Mel without a word. In the parking lot, I found my car vandalized. Cuck, spray painted across the windshield in red letters, and a dead rat stuffed under the windshield wiper. Darren's calling card, apparently. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. You want more? Come get it. Attached was an address downtown. Game on. The parking garage confrontation was where I stopped playing defense. The address led me to a downtown fitness center called Peak Performance. Darren's gym, according to the Instagram posts I'd been tracking. I spent Thursday morning doing reconnaissance, watching the place from a coffee shop across the street. Darren showed up at noon in his ridiculous lifted Jeep Wrangler, all chrome and attitude. He was exactly what I'd expected. 6'2", spray-tanned, wearing a tank top that showed off his sleeve tattoos. The kind of guy who took selfies between sets and called women babe unironically. I waited until evening, then made my move. First, I printed 500 flyers at a 24-hour copy center. Each one featured a screenshot from one of Mel's videos, carefully censored but unmistakably Darren, with the caption, Ask Darren Brooks about his amateur film career, and now showing at Roosevelt Elementary. I slipped into the gym during the busy evening rush and spent 20 minutes distributing flyers in lockers, on bulletin boards, and tucked under car windshields in the parking lot. Then I waited. Darren emerged from the gym around 9 p.m., flanked by his buddy Ty, a shorter, stockier guy who seemed to exist primarily to film Darren's workouts for social media. You've got to be kidding me, Darren said, staring at the flyer on his windshield. That's when I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Evening, Darren. Nice night for a chat. He spun around and I got my first close look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. Up close, he was even more ridiculous. Perfectly styled hair, teeth too white to be natural, and the kind of artificial tan that suggested he spent more on grooming than most people spend on rent. You're the husband, he said, looking me up and down dismissively. Eddie, right? Mel told me all about you. I'll bet she did. Did she mention that our 7-year-old son accidentally showed your performance to his entire second-grade class? Ty snickered. Dude, that's messed up. Shut up, Ty, Darren snapped. Then to me, look, man, I'm sorry about the kid thing. That wasn't supposed to happen, but Mel and we have something real. She's leaving you anyway. Is she? Because last I checked, she was begging me not to divorce her. Darren's confident smile faltered slightly. She's just scared. Once the dust settles... The dust? I laughed. Darren, you have no idea how much dust there's going to be. I pulled out my keys and casually dragged them along the side of his precious Jeep, leaving a long, deep scratch in the paint. What the heck? Darren lunged at me, but I was already moving. I'm not faster, I called over my shoulder as I ran toward the stairwell, but I'm smarter, and I know where the cameras are. The chase through the parking garage was like something out of a movie, if movies featured out-of-shape IT managers being pursued by angry fitness influencers. Darren and Ty pounded after me up the concrete stairs, their voices echoing off the walls. When I catch you, you're dead, Darren shouted. Should I film this? Ty called out, breathing heavily. Just run, you idiot! I reached the fourth floor and ducked behind a parked SUV. My heart was hammering, and I was already winded. These guys worked out for a living. I worked at a desk, but I had advantages they didn't. I'd spent the afternoon studying the garage layout, and I knew things they didn't, like the fact that the security cameras had blind spots, and the fact that the exit on the north side led directly to a busy street where a scene would attract attention. And most importantly, the fact that Darren's Jeep was parked directly under a camera that would have recorded everything, including him chasing me after I deliberately provoked him by vandalizing his car. I made it to the north exit and slipped out onto the street, where I'd parked my own car 3 blocks away. Behind me, I could hear Darren and Ty arguing. Did you see which way he went? No, man, he just disappeared. This isn't over, Darren yelled into the night. I drove home feeling better than I had in days. For the first time since this nightmare started, I was the one making the moves. My phone buzzed with a notification. Darren had posted a video on Instagram, standing next to his scratched Jeep. Some people can't handle the truth, he said to the camera. When you're weak, you lash out. When you can't satisfy your woman, you blame the man who can. Eddie Harper, if you're watching this, you just made a big mistake. The video already had 50 likes and a dozen comments, mostly from gym bros offering to handle me for him. But I wasn't worried. I had bigger plans. When I got home, there was a package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. You want the whole truth? It's worse than you think. A friend. I plugged the drive into my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. More videos. But these weren't just affairs. They were recordings of Mel and her friends planning how to destroy me in the divorce, how to claim misuse, how to hide assets, how to make sure I'd never see Leo again. And in the background of one video, I could see Jenna's distinctive living room. Mel's best friend had been recording everything. Time for phase 2. The office confrontation was where Mel's world truly collapsed. Friday morning, I showed up at Mel's marketing firm during their monthly staff luncheon, a catered affair in the conference room where the entire team gathered to celebrate wins and network. I dressed carefully, my best suit, professional briefcase, confident smile. To anyone watching, I looked like a successful husband dropping by to surprise his wife. Mel's face went ashen when she saw me walk into the conference room. Eddie, what are you doing here? Surprise, honey, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I thought I'd share some exciting news with your colleagues. Her boss, Patricia Chen, looked up from her salad. Oh, you must be Mel's husband. We've heard so much about you. Have you? I smiled warmly. Well, I hope you'll find this interesting. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to the conference room's presentation screen. Eddie, don't, Mel whispered. But it was too late. The first video began playing, not the explicit content, but the audio recording from Jenna's living room where Mel and her friends had planned their strategy. Mel's voice filled the room. The key is to establish a pattern of emotional misuse. Eddie's too nice. That's actually perfect, because no one expects nice guys to fight back. We document everything, make him look controlling and unstable. Then I get full custody and half his assets. The conference room went dead silent, except for Mel's recorded voice continuing. Jenna's lawyer says if I can prove he's psychologically damaging Leo, I might even get spousal support. The affairs won't matter if I can paint him as the real villain. Patricia Chen's fork clattered onto her plate. I paused the recording and looked around the room at 25 stunned faces. My wife has been having multiple affairs for months, I announced conversationally. She documented these affairs on video and stored them on a device our 7-year-old son had access to. When he accidentally showed these videos to his 2nd grade class, she decided the best strategy was to claim I was controlling and try to destroy my reputation. I clicked to the next file bank record showing the hotel charges. These expenses were paid for with company credit cards, by the way. I believe that's against your ethics policy? Patricia Chen was staring at Mel with a mixture of horror and disgust. Melissa, is this true? Mel tried to speak, but only a strangled sound came out. I clicked to the final slide screenshots of text messages between Mel and Darren discussing their plans to ruin me financially. The best part, I continued, is that she involved your biggest client in this scheme. Darren Brooks isn't just her affair partner. He's the fitness influencer you hired for the peak performance campaign. The same campaign she's been managing. I wonder how the client will feel when they learn their spokesperson has been starring in amateur explicit videos with their account manager. Patricia Chen stood up abruptly. Melissa, you need to come to my office, now. I should mention, I added helpfully, that several news outlets have already reached out for comment. Apparently, this story is going viral on social media. Something about suburban mom's intimate video shown to elementary school class. A catchy headline, don't you think? Mel finally found her voice. You bastard. You're destroying everything. No, I said calmly, packing up my laptop. You destroyed everything. I'm just making sure everyone knows who's responsible. As I walked out, I could hear Patricia Chen's voice rising. Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you've done to this company's reputation? That evening, I got a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Lee. Saw on the news, that woman never deserved you. You want some soup? Mrs. Lee was 78 years old and had been watching our neighborhood drama unfold with the keen interest of someone who'd seen it all before. I was considering her soup offer when I heard a commotion outside. Through my window, I could see Darren's Jeep parked in front of my house, and Darren himself was on my front lawn shouting, Come out here, Eddie! Let's settle this like men! I opened my front door and stepped onto the porch. Half the neighborhood was watching from their windows. Problem, Darren? You cost me 3 sponsorship deals today, he yelled. 3! Do you know how much money that is? Probably less than you're going to lose when Peak Performance drops you tomorrow, I replied. I hear they don't like their brand ambassadors appearing in explicit content. Bad for the family-friendly image. This isn't over. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, it kind of is. I showed him the screen, a live stream of our conversation that was broadcasting to my newly created social media account. We already had 200 viewers. Say hi to the internet, Darren. They're very interested in your story. His face went purple. You're streaming this? Everything, I confirmed. Your threats, your admission that you've been sleeping with a married woman, your concern about lost sponsorship deals, rather than the welfare of a 7-year-old child who was traumatized by your actions. It's all going out live. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. Someone in the chat had recognized Darren and was sharing the link. You want to keep talking? I asked. Because this is great content. Darren looked around at the neighbors who were now openly watching from their porches, then at my phone streaming everything live, then back at me. Without another word, he got in his Jeep and drove away. The live stream ended with over 1,500 viewers and hundreds of comments, most of them supporting me and mocking Darren. But I wasn't done yet. The City Festival was where I spring the final trap. Saturday's Cleveland Community Days Festival in Riverside Park was perfect for my purposes. Hundreds of people, live music, food trucks, and, most importantly, a main stage with a sound system. I'd spent Friday night making calls, pulling strings, and cashing in favors. My buddy Greg from work had connections with the event organizers. Mrs. Lee knew the head of the neighborhood association. Even Principal Rowe, despite everything, had agreed to help once I explained my plan. This is either brilliant or insane, Greg said as we set up the wireless microphone system. Why not both? I'd sent carefully crafted messages to both Mel and Darren, asking them to meet me at the festival for a peaceful resolution. I'd promised to stop the social media campaign and delete all the evidence if we could just talk things through like adults. They bought it. Mel arrived first, looking haggard. She'd been fired yesterday afternoon, and it showed. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her makeup hastily applied. Eddie, thank God you're willing to be reasonable, she said, approaching the picnic table where I was sitting. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out. Can we? Because I have some questions first. Darren appeared a few minutes later, swaggering over in his typical uniform of tank top and designer sunglasses. Several people recognized him and started taking pictures. All right, let's get this over with, he said, sitting down across from me. What do you want? I want the truth, I said simply. All of it. How long has this been going on? How many others were there? And I want to know why you thought it was acceptable to destroy a family. What they didn't know was that I was wearing a wireless microphone connected to the festival's sound system. Greg was manning the audio board from behind the main stage, waiting for my signal. Look, Mel said, I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed. You filmed yourself sleeping with multiple men and stored it where our son could find it. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. She's a grown woman, Darren interjected. She can sleep with whoever she wants. Even married women, even mothers? Especially mothers, Darren smirked. They're more grateful. That was my cue. I touched my phone, sending Greg the signal. Suddenly, our entire conversation was being broadcast through the festival's sound system. Every word was echoing across the park, reaching hundreds of people. Mel's face went white as she realized what was happening. "You want to know the truth?" I said, my voice now carrying across the entire festival. "Here it is, Cleveland. My wife has been having affairs for months. She documented these affairs on video and stored them on a device our 7-year-old son had access to. When he accidentally showed these videos to his second-grade class, she decided to claim I was toxic to avoid consequences." The crowd was gathering now, drawn by the commotion and the amplified voices. "Eddie, stop!" Mel pleaded, but her voice was also being broadcast. "And this," I continued, gesturing to Darren, "is Darren Brooks, fitness influencer and home wrecker. Darren, would you like to tell everyone what you just said about mothers being more grateful?" Darren tried to stand up, but the crowd had formed a circle around us. People were holding up phones, recording everything. "This is harassment!" he shouted. "No," I said calmly, "this is consequences." Someone in the crowd recognized the story from social media and shouted, "Hey, aren't you the guy whose kid showed explicit videos to his class?" The crowd's mood turned ugly. People started booing, shouting questions, demanding answers. "How could you do that to a child? You should be ashamed. What kind of mother are you?" Mel tried to run, but the crowd was too thick. She stumbled, her heel catching on the grass, and fell directly into the dunk tank that was set up for the children's games. The splash was spectacular. Darren tried to help her up, but he slipped on the wet grass and went down too, landing in the tank with a tremendous splash. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. I stood up, removed the wireless microphone, and handed it to Greg. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "the truth has been served. Thank you for your attention." As Mel and Darren climbed out of the dunk tank, soaking wet and humiliated, the crowd continued to boo and hiss. Someone started chanting, "Shame, shame, shame," and others picked it up. They fled the festival in their wet clothes, chased by the sound of hundreds of people expressing their disgust. I found Leo at the face painting booth with Mrs. Lee, who was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Did you have fun, buddy?" "Yeah, Mrs. Lee bought me cotton candy and we watched the puppet show. Why is everyone clapping?" "They're just happy," I said, picking him up. "Ready to go home? Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely." As we walked to the car, my phone was buzzing with notifications. The festival incident was already trending on social media. #DunkTankJustice was climbing the charts. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more move to make. The final confrontation happened on my own terms, in my own home, with the whole world watching. Sunday evening, I was putting Leo to bed when my security system alerted me to movement in my backyard. I checked the cameras from my phone and saw Darren jimmying the lock on my back door. Perfect. I'd been expecting this. Desperate people do desperate things, and Darren had lost everything. His sponsorships, his reputation, his social media following. He blamed me, and he wanted revenge. What he didn't know was that I'd upgraded my security system after the car vandalization incident. Every camera was now connected to a live stream that automatically activated when motion was detected. And I'd shared the link with my growing social media following. I quietly moved Leo to Mrs. Lee's house. She was expecting us, then returned to watch Darren's performance. He was trashing my living room, looking for something. Probably the original iPad or any other evidence I might have stored. He overturned furniture, emptied drawers, and spray-painted more obscenities on my walls. All of it was being broadcast live to over 3,000 viewers. The comments were brutal. "Call the cops! This guy is unhinged. Someone record this for evidence." After 20 minutes of destruction, Darren gave up and left. But I was ready for him. I followed him to his apartment complex downtown, where he was apparently having some kind of party to celebrate his newfound infamy. His buddies from the gym were there, along with several women who seemed impressed by his social media notoriety. I walked right up to his front door and knocked. Ty answered. "Oh crap, Darren, it's the husband." The party noise died down as I stepped inside. Darren was holding court in the center of the room, regaling his audience with his version of recent events. "The guy's obsessed with me," he was saying. "Can't handle the fact that his wife prefers a real man." "Interesting story," I interrupted. "But I think your guests might be more interested in seeing what you did to my house tonight." I held up my phone showing the live stream footage of Darren breaking and entering, vandalizing my property, and destroying my belongings. "That's breaking and entering, destruction of property, and criminal mischief," I announced to the room. "All felonies. all recorded in high definition. The party guests started backing away from Darren like he had a contagious disease. "You set me up," Darren snarled. "I gave you enough rope," I corrected. "You hanged yourself." His girlfriend, a young blonde who looked like she was questioning her life choices, stared at him in horror. "You broke into his house? Darren, what's wrong with you?" "It's not what it looks like." "It looks like a crime," she said, grabbing her purse. "I'm out of here." Half the party followed her out the door. I walked over to Darren's prized sneaker collection, dozens of pairs of limited edition shoes displayed on custom shelving. "Nice collection," I said, picking up a pair of shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Don't touch those." "Why not?" I asked, opening a bottle of protein shake that was sitting on his counter. "You touched my property." I poured the thick chocolate-flavored liquid over the shoes. "You always said you liked it thick," I said, moving to the next pair. Darren lunged at me, but Ty and another guy grabbed him. "Dude, stop!" Ty said. "You're already in enough trouble." I systematically ruined a dozen pairs of his precious shoes while he watched helplessly. "There," I said, setting down the empty bottle. "Now we're even." "This isn't over," Darren said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, it is," I replied. "You see, while you were busy committing felonies at my house, I was busy sending evidence to the police, to your landlord, to your remaining sponsors, and to your probation officer." His face went white. "What probation officer?" "The one you'll have after you're convicted of breaking and entering. Did you know that's a second-degree felony in Ohio? 2 to 8 years in prison?" I headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Darren, stay away from my family. Next time you won't get off so easy." Outside, police sirens were wailing in the distance, getting closer. I drove home to find Detective Malik waiting in my driveway. "Mr. Harper, we got your complaint about the break-in. We'll need a statement." "Of course, I have video evidence. We figured you might." As we walked through my vandalized house, documenting the damage, my phone rang. It was Mel. "Eddie, please, we need to talk." "No, we don't. The police are looking for Darren. They think he broke into your house." "They don't think it. They know it. I have video." "This has gone too far. Leo doesn't deserve this." "You're right," I said. "Leo doesn't deserve any of this. He doesn't deserve a mother who cares more about her affairs than his well-being. He doesn't deserve to be traumatized because you couldn't keep your legs closed, and he doesn't deserve to be used as a pawn in your attempts to avoid consequences. I'm his mother. You're a stranger who happens to share his DNA. A mother would have protected him. A mother would have put his needs first. A mother wouldn't have stored explicit material where he could find it. Eddie, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, full custody. You can see Leo on supervised visits once you complete a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. You can't do that. Watch me." I hung up and turned to Detective Malik. "How long before you arrest Darren?" "We're picking him up tonight. With the video evidence and the property damage, he's looking at serious charges." "Good." 3 hours later, I got Leo from Mrs. Lee's house and we went home. The living room was still trashed, but it didn't matter. We ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the kitchen floor while I told him we were going to redecorate. "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" he asked quietly. "Yes, buddy. We are." "Is it because of the videos on the tablet?" I looked at my son, my brilliant, innocent, resilient son, and decided he deserved honesty. Mommy made some very bad choices that hurt our family. Sometimes when adults make bad choices, there are consequences. One of those consequences is that she can't live with us anymore. Will I still see her? Sometimes, but you'll always live with me. He nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we get a dog?" I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. "Yeah, buddy, we can get a dog." My phone buzzed with a news alert. Local fitness influencer arrested for breaking and entering. The story included screenshots from my live stream and quotes from social media users calling for justice. Another notification showed that Mel's former employer had issued a statement distancing themselves from her actions and announcing new ethics policies. A third alert showed that Cleveland Coffee had published a follow-up story, Suburban Dad's Revenge, How One Father Fought Back Against Betrayal. I was trending again, but this time as the hero of my own story. Leo fell asleep on the couch while we watched cartoons. I carried him to his bed, then stood in his doorway watching him sleep peacefully. Tomorrow, I'd start the legal proceedings that would officially end my marriage and secure my son's future. Darren would be in jail, facing years in prison. Mel would be unemployed, friendless, and fighting for supervised visitation rights she'd probably lose. But tonight, Leo was safe, and we were home. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet suburban street where this nightmare had begun just 1 week ago. Mrs. Lee's porch light was on, and I could see her silhouette in her kitchen window, probably making soup for tomorrow. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. You won. A friend. I smiled and deleted the message. Justice served.